Wow. Take a look around. Check us out. It's absolutely amazing to me. I've been just over a year exploring all this. My name is Peter Melton. I used to live here from 2008 to 2013. And I went to college here way back as well. I have a brother who lives here with a family, and I get back here regularly. But I just continue to find it amazing. I've been on a couple of tours with Guy now, and it's just fascinating to ponder this topic and to sit with a group of people who are wanting to ponder this topic. What is going on with our climate? What does that mean to the future of humanity? Just that. Just possibly the most fascinating topic ever pondered by humanity. This is no messing around. This is amazing. And it's paradoxical. I was just talking to Rex, who's an old friend of mine too, and it's paradoxical because here I am wanting to present you with some of the most dire news you could possibly hear. And at the same time, I'm on fire about it. This rocks my world in such a positive and powerful way. It brings me to the moment in a way that nothing else ever has. And some compare it to like getting a terminal diagnosis or something, right? I've got 6 months to 2 years to live. It's like, whoa, all right, I gotta live, right? Or somebody who beats cancer and then says, oh, this is bonus time, watch me go, right? I'm holding nothing back now. I'm not hanging on to all this future stuff. When we start pondering how much energy we have in the future, when that starts going away for you, as it will tonight, you will feel the rush of the crap that you have staged in the future come running into you and filling you with this thrust of humanity that says, wow, what an amazing time to be alive. And here I am, and for whatever reason you're drawn to come here and to hear more and to talk more and to connect with other people who are pondering this, because when you talk with people who are believing this general idea, it's a whole different conversation than when you talk with your cousin or whoever who doesn't want anything to do with this. You're talking different languages. And I have found over and over again that meeting new people who are on this, there's an instant connection that happens. You're talking the same language in a way that you're not talking the same language before. So I set that up to say thank you for being here. And thank you for being part of me getting to experience this magic of humanity that's happening. So, everybody raise your hands and go blah, 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 blah. We're going to have to be able to raise our hands if we're feeling like something, or just interrupt if you're feeling like, but using your voice, this is an interactive talk. I brought some geeky science guy who's going to give you some science stuff. Yeah, that's you. Yeah. But more than anything, we're going to a little bit about science and then answer questions about science, but then we're going to move past that to what does this bring up in you? And who are we? And what is humanity anyway? And what have we been up to? And is the earth here for us? You know, are we here to have dominion over everything? Or would you say, dominion we did pretty good, but stewardship we're not so good at. And so, to get a feel for the audience, because we want to make sure that everybody comes along with us. How many people would say they're early in their investigating of climate change? Anybody early? A couple of earlies? Thank you for being honest about that. Middle, done a little bit, but not necessarily a lot. And how many people would say they've done quite a bit of looking into climate change? A couple. How many have heard any of the presentations of Guy McPherson? Okay, just a few of you. Great. Well, that sets up perfectly. Because everything sets up perfectly. Yeah. Whew. Okay. So, here we go. Once again, very interactive. Please ask questions. Please say stop if he's gone somewhere that you're not sure what he said or you're lost about something. He doesn't mind. It's all good. This is a community conversation. This is not I'm here to hear a lecture, which is why the seats are set up this way and not in rows. Okay. Woohoo!
In that theme, can I go?
Would you start, Tim?
All right. I taught at the University of Arizona for many years. There's a book that came out called Resist Much, Obey Little. Obviously, a Walt Whitman quote. Some thoughts or some words about Edward Abbey. It was a collection of stories written by people who had known Edward Abbey, the iconoclastic Tucson-based writer, the desert anarchist, as he is commonly known. And one of the essays was written by a woman named Nancy Mayers, who I was to meet many years later, and it was called 597AX. And that was the course title for an experimental course in creative writing she took from Edward Abbey, the first course he ever taught at the University of Arizona. And she described taking this course from this guy who'd never taught a course before, but who was a renowned writer. And she said at the end of the first day of class, when he'd gone over the syllabus and so on and blah, 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 he hadn't mentioned what they should call him, what the students should call him. And so she raised her hand and said, "What shall we call you?" And he said, "You shall call me Mr. Abbey, and I will call you Ms. Mayers," and so on. And she wrote, and I used this quote to begin the semester in every class I ever taught at the University of Arizona. "Manners are pretty casual at this university, as they're bound to be anywhere the climate permits students to go around more than half naked most of the year. Once I've seen a student's navel, I find it hard to call him Mr. Holmes." And so I pointed out that in my classroom, at least, you will not call me Dr. McPherson, and I will not call you Mr. Holmes, and I certainly don't want to see your belly button. So the same goes here. There are plenty of things to divide us, to separate us. So first names and interrupt at will, please, because nothing I have to say is so important that it can't be clarified by what you have to say.
Let us begin with the mass media and the presentation of how we get our news.
All right.
Hey, ready? Go.
He just pulls the string, he pushes the button, and he tells me that.
Sometimes it's a little bit like a post.
This is just like that. That's why I didn't want to get too far away. Strings are hard to pull from a distance. When I was a kid, and when most of you were kids too, we got our news from a couple of primary sources. We got it from broadcast media, the radio. Youngsters are shocked. The radio and television. And people gathered around the television every night. And some people still do. 5:30 and at 10 or 11, depending on your time zone. And watch the local news. And everybody read the local newspaper. Where I lived, everybody got the local newspaper. Everybody read the local newspaper. And nobody does that anymore. Almost nobody does that anymore. We get our news from different sources now than we did then. And I didn't know it at the time, but a whole bunch of that news that was presented to me was coming from the same outlet. The two primary outlets for print media at the time were UPI and AP, Associated Press and United Press International. And so at least 80% of the information that appeared in the local daily newspaper was the same in every local daily newspaper. There was the local news section, but then there was the 80% that was about the national news and the international news, and that was all fed on ticker tape from UPI and AP. And it took me years. In fact, it was when my brother started teaching as a professor at a small liberal arts college, mass media communication, that I learned that at this point, there are only a handful of corporations that provide more than 90% of the media we receive. A handful. They're corporations. And they provide almost all the information we see. And so we really have a corporate media. And a whole bunch of that information we receive is not really relevant to our lives. And we aren't getting the whole information, the whole scoop on what is relevant to our lives. So unless you're following the alternative media, alternative, whatever that means, out of the mainstream, I would argue that you're not getting a lot of information that is relevant to how we conduct our daily lives. You're going to get a lot of information that focuses on celebrity or celebrity culture. So if you want to know about the Kardashians, I encourage you to keep watching the news. I don't remember who it was, some famous broadcaster said many years ago, if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. If you watch the news, you're misinformed. And that's an anchor man. And so here we are, terribly misinformed, or uninformed, about most things that matter. And one of those things is climate change. What we hear from the media, if we hear anything at all, is that climate change will be solved, that it's not a problem for the next many years. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change just came up with the summary report of their 5th assessment and concluded that we don't have anything to worry about for 86 years. By the year 2100, we're going to have to start living differently. Well, there's a report that came out of the Referee Journal Literature 4 years ago indicating that if we maintain emissions at the current level, so 2010 levels, we'll be at 16 degrees centigrade above baseline by 2100. 16 degrees centigrade above baseline. We'll give that some context. Baseline means the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, about 1750. We haven't had humans on the planet, if humans in any form, at 3.5 C or more above baseline. 16 C above baseline sounds like a problem to me. That was on current emissions path 4 years ago. Since then, of course, we've increased emissions every single year. In a paper written many years ago, famous NASA climate scientist James Hansen pointed out that somewhere between 300 and 350 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a cause for concern. That once we hit 350 parts per million, it's going to be a death sentence. That's the upper bound that we absolutely cannot cross. We're now at about 400 parts per million. If we add on the carbon dioxide equivalent of a single other methane gas from a handful of greenhouse gases, add on the carbon dioxide equivalent of a single greenhouse gas, that of methane, one of a handful of greenhouse gases, we're at 550, 600 parts per million equivalent of carbon dioxide. 350 is a death sentence. We're at least 580.
Death sentence in 10 years?
Well, if for small island states in sub-Saharan Africa, 350 parts per million is a death sentence. And we see that already. 5 million people die early deaths every year because of climate change, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. So it's a death sentence right now. And we don't know about it because we're relatively wealthy Caucasian people living in the quote first world. So we're relatively protected from those places that are experiencing catastrophic impacts of climate change already.
You mentioned the degrees over baseline. Let's go back and make sure that that's understood in a little possible terms.
Yeah, so in 1750, the global planetary average temperature was about 14 degrees centigrade, about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Global average, year-round, all the time, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And now it's 0.85 degrees above that, centigrade, about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's about 56.5 degrees Fahrenheit global average. 1.5 degree temperature change on the Fahrenheit scale sounds like nothing. And in fact, given what we experience every day, it really is nothing, isn't it? And when we experience temperature changes in this part of the world, very frequently 30, 40, 50 degrees Fahrenheit every day. It's the diurnal temperature fluctuation. It's nearly freezing at night, 70 degrees during the day. So we can handle that. What we can handle is not of primary concern. We're clever. I think we assigned ourselves the wrong name. Homo sapiens means the wise ape. I think Homo calidus would have been a little bit better. We're clever. Calidus means clever. So we're clever monkeys, we're clever apes. But I'm not sure we're so wise to see very far into the future and concentrate on what might happen to the grandchildren. And what might happen with a relatively small temperature rise over a relatively short period of time. So, an example. the United Nations Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases in October of 1990 pointed out that 1 degree C will produce rapid, non-linear, irreversible changes in ecosystems. So 1 degree C above baseline is going to so alter ecosystems irreversibly that it's going to have impacts on our ability to survive. Well, here we are at 0.85 C, and we've triggered the kinds of self-reinforcing feedback loops, or positive feedback, that the United Nations was warning about 24 years ago. Last month, a guy named David Spratt, in a presentation on climate myths, pointed out that probably that number should have been 0.5 C. Not 1 C, but 0.5 C. Well, 0.5 C has been in the rearview mirror for a long time now. And he said that's where we obviously should have stopped, because we triggered all these self-reinforcing feedback loops. 0.5 C, as it turns out, is catastrophic. 1 C was way too conservative, as you would expect from a conservative body comprised of a bunch of scientists contributing to the United Nations. So, here we are 24 years later, and 0.85 C above baseline at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, so about 15 degrees centigrade. And we have triggered numerous self-reinforcing feedback loops. These are, so you kick a soccer ball on a soccer field, it rolls to a halt relatively quickly because there's grass and there's gravity slowing it down. But if you kick the soccer ball over a cliff, the further it goes, the more rapidly it grows until it reaches terminal velocity. The faster it falls, and so the more distance it covers in each second. So that's a self-reinforcing feedback loop. It feeds upon itself. And so, for example, methane leaking out of the Arctic Ocean, bubbling out of the Arctic Ocean from subsea permafrost or clathrates or hydrates in the relatively shallow sea floor of the Arctic. So those clathrates are chemical cages around methane, CH4 molecules. And as they warm, the clathrate or the cage breaks open and methane is released directly into the water column or into the atmosphere. Well, methane is more than 100 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide molecule for molecule. And so we release a little methane and we're in serious trouble on the climate front. And in the Arctic, methane started coming out of the Arctic Ocean, bubbling out of the Arctic Ocean. And it appears it went exponential in about 2007. And the more methane comes out, the warmer it gets. The warmer it gets, the more it warms the relatively shallow ocean floor, and therefore the more methane clathrates and methane from subsea permafrost is released into the water column and into the atmosphere. So that's a self-reinforcing feedback loop. It feeds upon itself. The more methane that is released, the warmer it gets, the warmer it gets, the more it releases methane. They feed upon each other too. So warm Atlantic water started pouring through the Fram Strait off the north and east coast of Greenland instead of reversing course as part of the thermohaline conveyor belt or Gulf Stream a few years ago. So we have warm water going up, warm Atlantic water shooting through the Fram Strait directly into the Arctic. Well, you know what that does? It warms up the Arctic and therefore releases more of those clathrates and more of the methane from the subsea permafrost. And so that warms it even more. So they interact with each other as well, and not in a way we desire. These self-reinforcing feedback loops or positive feedback. So it's getting pretty loopy out there. We've triggered 40 of these that are irreversible that I know about. And the hits keep coming. For many, many, many years, the primary cause for concern was carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, with the exception of water vapor. Carbon dioxide is the dominant greenhouse gas and the one that we produce by burning fossil fuels. So we take fossil fuels, mostly plant matter, a little bit of animal mixed in, that has been put under pressure over the course of millions of years, and therefore forms coal down at the base and oil and gas as we go further up. So these are the fossil fuels. And we discovered that. And tell them the monkey story. The monkeys in the jungle.
Oh, okay.
I think that fits nicely.
You need a rest.
I just like to hear you talk.
So analogies help play a really big part for understanding this and also for sharing it for those of us who end up wanting to talk to someone else. And one great analogy that we heard was, so the monkeys are out there and the monkeys find fire. And they're like, wow, this is amazing. Keep me warm. I can do great things with it. Yeah. But they didn't realize what they had. And so they were keeping themselves warm, and this was all nice, and there was some light I could see. But hey, there's something over there. And the monkeys didn't realize what they had, and they burned down the jungle. And that's similar to where I think we find ourselves, is we didn't realize what we had in fossil fuels. We didn't realize the effect it could have if we didn't pay close attention to it. And we're in the process of burning down our jungle.
Yeah, so a few people knew all along. It was in 1847 that U.S. naturalist George Perkins Marsh, U.S. naturalist and ambassador, 1847 points out if we burn fossil fuels, it's going to warm up the planet. And so some people have known for a long time what the consequences of burning fossil fuels are, that among those consequences are general warming of the planet, and that's going to have some serious adverse consequences. But it's pretty irresistible when we have this incredibly compact energy source that does so many things for us, and the consequences of it seem so far away. It's sort of a tragedy of the commons experience. You know, I burn a little bit of coal, I burn a little bit of oil, I burn a little gas. It keeps me warm, it keeps water running through the taps, it allows me to drive my car. It does all these amazing things for me, lets me play on my smartphone. It's great stuff. It's really amazing stuff. And besides which, if I don't use it, you're going to use it. The next guy's going to get it. So I might as well use it. I mean, it's just my share. Everybody else is doing it. So culturally, we're sort of driven to consuming these fossil fuels. And not only that, there's a 40-year lag between when carbon dioxide emissions are generated and when a majority of the heating that results from that occurs. There's actually a 25 to 50-year lag before 60% of the heating is realized.
And this was really key when it came out. I'd like to tell more of his story. Guy quit teaching and bet it all on permaculture homestead in New Mexico. So he quit teaching and moved out to New Mexico and has a full-on 27-acre homestead, thinking that we're going to have to take care of ourselves, right? We're going to have to grow our own food, we're going to have to be off the grid, because this fossil fuel thing may not last, and the civilization could get a little shaky.
And then 3 years later, we hear about the 40-year lag. Oops, mistakes have been made. And so now we know about the 40-year lag. Well, what do we know about carbon dioxide emissions in the last 40 years? Up until 1970, we, as a civilized set of human beings, burned a certain amount of fossil fuels, contributed a certain amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Since 1970, we've more than doubled that. So we burned more than twice as much post-1970 as we did in the entire history of humanity before 1970. All that is baked into the cake, and we haven't realized the majority of the temperature change yet because of that so-called 40-year lag. So all that's a done deal, and we've triggered all these self-reinforcing feedback loops. Put those two together, and they indicate that we're in the midst of abrupt climate change.
Could you expound a little bit on the 40-year lag? I mean, why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the estimate from a paper by James Hansen and colleagues was that there was a 25 to 50-year lag before most of the heating, 60% of the heating, would occur. And so that's been rounded to a 40-year lag. You know, the midpoint of 25 to 50 is 37.5. Scientists come along, yeah, 40, whatever, close enough. Because it's really an estimate anyway. Could be a little less than that, could be a little more than that, we don't really know. That's primarily because the carbon dioxide that is produced gets soaked up by the battery that is the world's oceans. So the ocean is an amazing battery, in that it absorbs a bunch of heat and it absorbs a bunch of carbon dioxide. But at some point, that heat and that carbon dioxide comes out. The heat comes out most notably during El Nino years. You've heard about El Nino years, and during El Nino winters you get a bunch of rain here in this part of California. And that's because there's a tremendous release of heat from the oceans. And also we observe increased land temperatures during El Nino years. So the ocean serves as a tremendous battery, soaks in a bunch of that carbon dioxide, delays its release into the atmosphere for a majority of it. Then it gets up into the atmosphere and has to get fully mixed and moved around. Imagine you, on a sunny day this time of the year, you leave your windows open in your car, you come inside for a couple of hours, you go back out, it's exactly the same temperature inside as it is outside. You get into your car, you start driving down the road, it's a little cool, so you roll up the windows. You roll up the windows, what does that do? It allows the same amount of heat to come in as was coming in before when it was sitting there with the windows rolled down. But now a bunch of the long wave radiation can't get out, it's trapped in there. You have a greenhouse on wheels, you call it a car, but really it's a greenhouse on wheels. You're trapping a bunch of that carbon dioxide, and that captures the long wave radiation and doesn't let it escape. Same thing. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is rolling up the windows. It just takes a while because it's a really big car. And first the carbon dioxide goes into the trunk, into the battery, into the ocean. And then it's released, so there's this lag. And so it takes a while. So by the time a majority of the heating is realized, 40 years have gone by. I was 14 years old and barely driving a car. When most of the heat resulting from my actions of driving a car would be realized. Who knew? We didn't know about that until about 4 years ago. And even then, the human behavior, the tendency would be to, somebody will figure that out 40 years from now. Because we always do.
And this is the information that's starting to come out now. In 2007, Al Gore put out his movie. Who saw Al Gore's movie? That was blockbuster, game-changer movie, Inconvenient Truth. Oh my God, look what's happening, right? There's actually this climate change stuff going on, and it could be pretty serious down the road a ways. But, lower your footprint a little and change your light bulbs and we should be okay. And it was far enough out in the future that it was just like, wow, right? But over the last 7 years since that came out, so 10 years since he did the research, the technology for us to measure what's happening in the ocean and in the sky has skyrocketed. And there's a lot of people, the people who doubt what Guy has to say there's been this long pause. Since 1997, there's been this pause. Global warming's not a big problem. But they never had thermometers. They only had the land thermometers going on. We didn't have thermometers in the ocean. We saw no need to measure that very much. Then we started putting thermometers in the ocean. And oh no.
And coming up with proxy records to tell us what the temperature used to be in the ocean. So it correlates with what we didn't measure, but which we can estimate now.
Yeah, so the news is starting to bubble up. We're starting to not realize, as a culture, we're realizing the media is not giving us the whole story. And it's starting to happen. And I want to pay tribute right now to this gal over here, Mimi Riley. She's in charge of sustainability at Butte College. And she's teaching her students about this. And we were at Butte College today. And Mimi, why don't you tell the group about how today was at Butte College?
Oh, well, I have a seminar class in sustainability studies, and there are 9 students in there. And they're studying abrupt climate change. They're studying near-term extinction. And I questioned myself the first couple of weeks of that seminar, did I do the right thing? But I'm always sort of on the cutting edge. And I feel a responsibility as a teacher, college teacher, to expose my students to the science that's out there and let them make decisions for themselves. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with people, and I know I have a lot of colleagues who think that maybe it's perhaps not very responsible, but I would argue very differently that science is there, This is a world they're living in, and we're not doing them any favors at all by trying to protect them. And it's been very difficult for them. Very, very difficult. And I know that I told them the first day that it may seem like a curse, and they're stuck in my class if they want the certificate. But by the end of the semester, they're going to know a lot about climate change, and they're going to have processed a lot of the things that they're hearing, and they're going to accept or not accept, or whatever, however they're going to deal with it. But they're going to be much further along than the majority of people, and they're going to have the ability to be sort of out on the cutting edge, talking to folks about this in a very intelligent way. And I think that, you know, I think that the biggest shame of this whole thing is that we can't talk about it. Right? Nobody wants to talk about it. You start talking about it in a room, and it's like you just dropped a big bomb, and everyone walks away from you. No one wants to talk about it. So if we can't even talk about it, how are we going to ever even begin to process it or move our lives in a direction that's meaningful? So. Yeah, it went really well today, and I think they really appreciated having God come. They were a little intimidated, a little nervous talking to him. Some of them were really looking for reasons to absolutely hate him. And I think by the
And I delivered.
You did deliver. By the end of the conversation, I think that it really went over really well.
And before that, 9-person, I didn't count today, was there 100? Close to 100 people.
Yeah.
For an hour-and-a-half session, which was part 1 of 2 parts at Butte College in Oroville, that had 75 students and 25 adults from the community and teachers and stuff, who got part 1, all the science of climate, and on Thursday is part 2, which we'll get into later too, is what does this bring up in you? How does this show up? And so that's continuation on Thursday. If you'd like to go to Butte College in Oroville for more goodness on this front, that's available for you then. But also I want to mention the last month we were here, and Chico State Sustainability hosted us, and we had 130 people at Chico State, half students and half community members. Were some of you there? Yeah, a couple of you guys. And then we had 50 people the following night at the 100th Monkey. And then Chico State has just now invited us back for the sustainability conference they do in March.
March 26th, 27th.
So not only did they dare to have us there, but they're bringing us back for their key event of the year, where they bring students from all over the world to come learn about sustainability, because we're realizing that we can't just sustain this status quo thing. And that's what sustainability has been kind of meant a little bit. Can we sustain this groovy life we're living, where I've still got all these toys and I can still go do whatever I want to do? But we're realizing that we're needing to urge ourselves beyond sustainability. 2 days ago, we were at UC Davis. They had a sustainability conference. 500 college students from mostly around California. California Student Sustainability Coalition. You were there, young lady. And we got to be on a panel with 100 students. And man, was it powerful. And one kid asked at the end, well, what do we do? And I said, you know what, no matter what you do, no matter what your major is that you think you're going into, whatever your business might be, whatever your passions might be, that's going to happen in a shifting world, right? That you're not going to plant your new great idea into a status quo 2014. Your idea has to take into consideration that we're moving into shifting sands. And your business needs to do that. And your life needs to do that. And we're not sure what that's going to be, but if you are serious about your life and moving forward, you at least need to be climate aware. You at least need to dare to educate yourself around what seems to be going on. Not that he's got all the actual, all 100% answer, not saying that. Please investigate, please prove him wrong. You know, you used to say that, you don't say that anymore. I hope I'm wrong, you don't even say that anymore. We'd love to hear that he's wrong and that there's something going on that's making all this come back into being, into balance. But unfortunately, there is nothing on the good side of the ledger. Nothing.
About the Keystone Pipeline not being passed.
Thank you, I just saw that, yeah, Keystone Pipeline not being passed.
Well, could that
For
be
now.
considered a small victory? or
Small
is that-
victory, absolutely, something,
Okay.
something, yes.
Or is it
And-
just distracting, maybe?
Well,
It's just a distraction. If they don't put in the Keystone XL pipeline, they're gonna transport it through trains, which are gonna go through our community. And they're supposed to.
Yeah, it's gonna go to the delta, you know, down south
Like by
regardless, pipeline or train.
yeah, so that's part of the process, thank you, because this is where we go. Well, wait a minute, something has to be out there. Something, surely there's people who've known about this, the smart people, the government, there's somebody who's been thinking about this, who's doing something, who's coming up with technology, right? Technology could save us, right? But this guy studies, looks everywhere to try to find that. 30 years he's been watching climate change. What kind of person does this for 30 years?
Twisted, warped, really obsessed, damaged, probably mentally disabled.
I think
Thank you for bringing all that up.
Yes.
one of the scariest books I read was called With Speed and Violence, about abrupt climate change. And that was maybe 8 years ago. And I guess we hang it up. I mean, I gotta ask, is there anything that you think looks promising on the horizon? To me, there is. I don't think there's any political will to do anything right.
Yes, I think there is something. Collapse of industrial civilization.
You and Derek Jensen. I agree.
Right, so of course, we can't sustain the unsustainable forever. And as Tim Garrett pointed out in a paper published in the journal Climatic Change, and written more than 7 years ago, only collapse of civilization prevents runaway greenhouse. I think it's too late to prevent runaway greenhouse. I think we're already there.
Which will collapse the civilization.
What's that?
That will collapse the civilization.
Yeah, that by itself. But I think industrial civilization is in the not too distant future. And that won't necessarily make things better for us, especially relatively wealthy white people like us. But it will make things infinitely better for non-human species. Not to mention the many people of color we oppress and kill every single day so that we can maintain this living arrangement. So, better days ahead.
So it's the Dmitry Orlov reinventing collapse, economic collapse.
Right. And it's not just Orlov. You know, it's James Howard Kunstler
Yeah.
and Bill Clinton, surprisingly enough, June 2012. And a whole bunch of other people indicating that, of course, we can't sustain the unsustainable, not indefinitely. But we're all born into this. Right, I mean, we didn't vote for this. We just showed up on this planet at this time in history, and we didn't get to say, I'd like to dial all this back. You know, I mean, try walking into a grocery store and tell them to turn off the thermostat. The guys with the padded suits will be in shortly, thank you. I mean, we can't even ask for relatively minor changes in our neighborhood businesses, much less changes in the whole system. So we're born into captivity. We think it's a terrible thing when animals, when a bird breaks a wing and so it has to spend the rest of its life in captivity. It's even worse, we think, when an animal is so endangered that it's born in a zoo and has to spend its entire life in captivity. That's us. We spend our entire lives born into captivity. Try to act like a human being. In this culture, it's anathema. We're all playing on our smartphones and driving our cars and doing all these things that culture tells us to do, and chasing the job and chasing the money. And humans for 2.5 million years didn't do any of this. For 2.5 million years, humans lived much closer to land and didn't ever, not even once, go into human population overshoot global level. That's a recent phenomenon. But it's too late to turn that ship around. I mean, when industrial civilization collapses, it triggers the catastrophic meltdown of more than 400 nuclear power plants around the world. That's going to be inconvenient. So, we're damned if we do and damned if we don't.
And this is what I love about his work, is he dares to connect all the dots. So many scientists will say, you know, this isn't looking good, we better do something. The end. Right? And that's everywhere. Very few of scientists are saying we're in good shape. In fact, I haven't heard any. You know, they might deny that it's terrible, but they're not saying, everything's fine. You know, we know everything's not fine, but we don't want to hear that, and we're programmed not to hear that. What's that book you have, Mimi, about that?
Called, and you should all get a copy. It's the best one I've ever read on the topic. Don't even think about it, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change, by George Marshall, 2014. And I've read a lot of these books, and usually I don't even finish them, but this one is, you can take a look at it later. It's brilliant.
And to be fair, you haven't read Extinction Dialogues.
No.
Right.
Oh, do you have a new book?
Oh, thank you for
Oh,
asking.
yeah, that's funny. So yeah, we're, at some level, of course, we don't want to hear this. And
as pointed out in that book, sometimes we can't. We literally cannot hear it because it's so far beyond our ability to imagine. It's so far beyond our experience.
Well, I feel like there's us here that have come to terms with it, and there's everyone else that hasn't. You have to change the imbalance.
right,
So
so
to
you
speak.
you look for it, it's fun, we have these talks with long drives and stuff, it's like, what could possibly make this happen? All right, so here's 32 people out of 70,000 in Chico alone, right? Now granted, not all of them got to hear about it, but we would somehow have to get everybody in the whole globe on board with an idea that you can barely get into the newspaper right now. And then once we get it into the newspaper, here's the solution. We must shut down all of global civilization. We must limit our population dramatically. We must completely change our diet to only use foods that are easy to grow in good places with little water and no pesticide. Who's on board? Who wants to help me? What category do you want to help me with? You know? It's like that's the kind of, and we have to convince everyone on the planet. Quickly. And our politicians too,
Yeah.
if we keep politics.
Quickly,
There's another way.
What's that?
All you have to do is convince the 1% of the people who control our government that there's money in it somehow.
There you go. There you go. We all volunteer to give all our money. Everybody gives everything they own to the 1%.
And sell it, and, you know, you just gotta
I like
convince
that
them.
idea.
Well, I feel like instead of convincing somebody that capitalistic gains are secondary to just a better world.
Yeah, I mean, you say it right there.
Good enough, though.
And, well,
Yeah.
yeah, like,
It's hard, I mean, are you willing to give up your cell phone? I mean, even just that step.
well, yeah.
Are you willing to quit eating meat?
And that's me, who I live on an average level when I look around. I mean, obviously, to other parts of the world, not so much, but trying to convince them to the 1%, they have everything. They're not going to just give up.
They're living, they're basking in the glory of their win, right? I won, I have it all, this is beautiful, this is mine, I'm in control.
But,
And
oh, man.
and then we lose, our humanity gets fuzzy and we can't realize what we're up to. All of us, I mean, we could blame the rest of them, but we're all in this soup. We've all gotten so addicted to our luxuries and our conveniences that we're blinded.
Well, we're also in a race with climate change. Is in a race with nuclear disaster.
Right.
So, which one's going to win?
And the 6th grade extinction.
An economic meltdown.
And there's so many things going on, and they all point towards this isn't going to turn out this way.
Still got to smile. Live every day.
That's the
Yes.
point.
So that's the whole point. Is to live every day. They say you only live once. You only die once. You live every day. Live every moment.
Would we consider Barack Obama citing the climate change, what was it, with China? China's
Yeah, starting in 2025, by golly, we're going to have to start reducing emissions.
China doesn't have to reduce it until 2035.
And of course, by that time, we will have reduced emissions, I guarantee you,
Yeah.
because we're peak fossil fuels already.
Yeah.
So, meltdown of the system is going to come and force us to stop emitting.
Well, in China now, just the average person in this, in China is about where we were in the 50s.
Right.
They're just now beginning to get these luxurious things like automobiles, and, plastic goods,
Refrigerators.
Air
Yes.
conditioning.
and there's a lot more of them than there are.
Yeah, conveniences.
And then I don't doubt they have the education that you have, or if their professors or their government is allowing any of that information out.
And they suspended their one-child policy so they can have more consumers. You know, the most draconian population measure in the history of the civilized world, and it never worked anyway. In a generation, their human population increased significantly under the one-child policy, but they abandoned it because the population isn't growing fast enough to consume more. So, political will, let me know when you find some of that. And to be fair, there's no politically viable approach. Tim Garrett's work from more than 7 years ago indicates that only collapse of civilization prevents runaway climate change. Who's going to run on that campaign? I can just see the debate between the twin cheeks of the corporate ass, the Democrats and the Republicans, arguing about who can collapse the industrial economy first. I can do it in 3 months. I can do it in a month. Elect me and the lights go out next week.
And you bring up, somebody brought up the other gigantic elephant in the room, population. You know, we have these talks, or we dare to begin to look at what's going on with our species and our planet, and rarely does population ever come in. But we have a serious population problem.
And between population and consumption, you know, surely we're number one. I pointed out many years ago in the presentation that if you have a baby in the United States, over the lifetime of that baby, he or she will be consuming the resources equivalent to 37 babies in Kenya, for example. And so after the talk, one of my graduate students came up with her new child, Sarah, and said, I'd like you to meet my 37 children named Sarah. So at least she got it. Then she had another one a couple years later. It's working great. You know, it's one of those politically untouchable topics. Climate change, extinction, population, these things will not be touched by the political process because they encroach upon individual freedom.
Will they encroach upon the belief of the magic man in the sky?
Well, yes, and the notion that we can have infinite growth on a finite planet with no adverse consequences, which is the definition of neoclassical economics.
There's a quote about the species doing somewhere.
Oh, Farley Moab. I'm paraphrasing here, but he wrote something like, we believe we're an important species going somewhere important, and at the last minute, God will step in and save the day. It's delusion.
First time I heard that, it really got me. To dare to look at what it is humanity is, that we think we're so important. And we just got here, you know, and you start spreading out the cosmic picture, and you start looking at humanity, and we just got here, and we think we're it.
We're the bomb. Oh, wait, so we're the bomb.
And when I heard that, you know, I really resonated with that. Yeah, I thought that too. We're an important species. We're doing something important here.
Yeah.
What is that, though?
We're going in big places.
What is that, though? What is that important thing that we're doing?
I'd like to relate a little anecdote.
Did you raise your hand?
Just a few months ago, I was eating breakfast at Diner in Paradise, happened to sit down next to a guy, and I don't know how we got talking about things, but I figured him out pretty quickly, so I just kind of ended my encouraged him to talk to him. I said something about climate change. He said, "Oh, that's a myth," you know. And then I happened to bring the subject to population growth, and he said, "Oh, that's a myth too." He said, "The world could support 100 times as many people as it has now." And so at that point, I bit my tongue. I felt so much like saying, "Okay, let's see. Right now, when you go down to LA or San Francisco, you've got about 6 million going this way and 6 going that way. Multiply times 100. So now you've got 600. And so if you're the carpool lane and you have to exit, you better give yourself about 100 miles to do that. Right here, you're talking to people that are at least open-minded, and many of us probably have scientific backgrounds and so on. But the vast majority of people don't understand science, so they distrust it. And besides, what fun is it facing reality? You know, even back, you know, when I was younger, I heard a statistic that the average child watched 30,000 murders on television before he was 18. Doesn't mean we're all going to go out murdering people. We like, even something as gruesome as murdering, we love as a fantasy. And that's why kids are playing computer games all the time. The make-believe is a lot more enjoyable than reality. And so that's why I don't think there's much hope. I don't think people want reality. And if they do, if they face reality, they say, okay, well, Arnold, we've probably got 20 years left on this planet anyway, and maybe it'll last that long, so who cares? So between not caring and not believing, not caring, and preferring what's imaginary rather than reality, I don't see where there's much room to get to very many people.
You and me, man, we're going to a party. People are going to love us.
Can I just add to that for a second? You made me think of something that I think that we live in a culture that is highly infantilized.
Yeah. We don't
That's a big word.
I haven't grown up yet.
We don't. Very small children, or we're adolescents who think that we're invincible and technology will solve everything.
Yep.
Or we're little children who think that someone else out there is going to take care of everything for us. And what I'd like to see in this country, and I lived in Europe for a number of years, and it wasn't like that there. People were wide awake adults. And I would love to see that here someday. I don't know how that would have happened, but it's a big part of the problem.
Let's have a couple more people share about what's going through them now. Who wants to share a little bit in the circle? Yes?
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking, how is this going to play out? What is this going to look like for us, like this group of people right here, or the people living here in Chico? It's going to play out, we know, differently all over the world because it already is. And in fact, in a lot of places in the world, the society has been in a state of collapse forever without us paying really much attention. But what I feel like, what I can do, or what the people that are able to actually look at their bodies, they're that close enough to me. How is this going to play out for us? How can we prepare ourselves to help the people that are blind to it, that can't awaken right now for some reason? They will awaken unless they're just gone. And I guess I'd like to chat about that a little bit. What's it going to look like for each one of us personally here as this unfolds? I just think have a dialogue about that.
Thank you, Marion. Thanks for the inspiration you are. She's in the front row at Chico State and came to all three of our programs. Your daughter's right behind her, and their friend has taken the ball in Grass Valley. We have an event Thursday night in Grass Valley, and then Friday day in Grass Valley with a workshop based on you bringing friends into the story and daring to stick with it. And for your whole life you've been on this. And thank you for being here and doing your thing and bringing up a very important topic. Do we share this? Do we not share this? Is it important to share? Is it not? How can we possibly get this out?
Or how do we respond when the facts are hitting people in the face?
Yeah.
Because that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Miriam, have you read a book called Ishmael?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And is anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What'd you get from that?
Well, mostly the population is okay.
As long as it's not me.
Well, I don't mean that it's not in individual cases, but it's just the overall picture of it.
Right, and I think
Is natural, not okay or not okay, but natural.
But back to Mary, I feel this nurturing space, and so many people come, wow, here we are, and we're the front edge of exploring this. But there's these masses about to realize this whenever enough dominoes start to fall that you just can't ignore it anymore. that these masses are going to move into this space of what are you talking about? Near-term human extinction. You know?
Kurt
You
Vonnegut.
think
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you think all of them are gonna realize it? I mean, right now, you can't buy ammunition because people are stockpiling it. That's pretty scary.
Yes, it
You
is.
can't make it fast enough. Talking about regulated guns, but people are stockpiling ammunition. Well, what's up with that?
Well, maybe they, in the back of their minds, know something that they don't dare say, because that would be one reason to protect yourself, or think you can, or try to.
Kurt Vonnegut famously quoted two people on the question, why are we here? His son, Mark Vonnegut, after he got out of the insane asylum, before he received his degree in medicine from the Harvard Medical College, responded to the question, why are we here, with, we are here to help each other through this, whatever this is. And Kurt Vonnegut's uncle, sitting on a park bench with him, said in response to the question, why are we here? We're here to fart around and don't let anybody tell you any different. So I suspect somewhere between those two, and maybe including both of those two, is why we're here. We're here to help each other through this, whatever this is. And we don't know what the future looks like in detail. We don't know when collapse comes to Chico. We don't know when people start dying en masse in the Northern Hemisphere as a result of climate change. But I think we're here to help each other through this, whatever this is. And I also think we're here to fart around.
And this is where we're going to go with the second half. So we've been here an hour and we're going to go for 45 more minutes. And this is where we're going to keep going with this community discussion about what's going on and what comes up with us. And we really want the audience participation. So please feel free to move forward with that. Yes?
When I trained to work with people who had AIDS back at the beginning of the AIDS crisis in the Shanti Project in San Francisco, the first man who ever showed me his Kaposi sarcoma told a story, and it has never left me, and what he said was, if this is what it took for me to learn love, it was worth it. Also, last time I was in Berkeley, I went to a show called was it called Geezer? No, it was a different one. It was called Old Happens. And at that show, I met people from the co-housing in Berkeley, and we had a discussion, about 35 people sitting around talking about the show and aging, and one person's offering was that they had just founded something like a Conscious Elders Network, and their slogan, I can't wait to get my bumper sticker, is wake up, wake up, grow up, step up. And I think helping each other through this, whatever this is a new slogan for me too.
Yeah.
Somebody asked for their expiration date, and I don't know that for any of you, by the way. And somebody asked if I could provide some really scary statistics about everybody's expiration date. Well, it seems pretty clear that we...
Oops, we got one more person.
There's one more chair.
Seems pretty clear that methane bubbling out of the Arctic Ocean has gone exponential. And apparently fired the clathrate gun, as it's called, or the hydrate gun. These methane hydrates or clathrates bubbling out of the Arctic Ocean. It appears that that happened in 2007. And it's gone exponential since then. And unlike carbon dioxide, the effects of methane on temperature rise are very rapid. Whereas carbon dioxide is very recalcitrant in the atmosphere, lasts for thousands of years with a half-life of hundreds of years. The half-life of methane is about a dozen years, maybe less. And so the consequences of methane going into the atmosphere are quite sudden in terms of consequent temperature rise. So, according to very reliable data, methane released into the atmosphere has gone exponential globally. And temperature is going to follow that quite tightly, leading to up to a 4 degrees or more temperature rise by 2030, 10 degrees centigrade temperature rise by 2040. And we haven't had humans on the planet at 3.5 C above baseline. Paul Beckwith is the world authority on Arctic Ocean methane, and he pointed out just over 2 years ago that we could experience a 6 C temperature rise in as little as a decade. So the bottom line is, and he studied historical events, including an event 55 million years ago in which temperature rose 5 C in 13 years. So these are the kinds of abrupt changes that we're talking about with abrupt climate change. We're not in the linear phase anymore. We're in the abrupt temperature rise. We're in the exponential phase. And we tend to think in a linear fashion because that's what evolution by natural selection set us up for. We imagine that the relatively few years ahead will be like the relatively few years in the past, so we project forward based on recent events, but that doesn't work with exponential functions. So if you have a pond and it starts to fill up with algae, and the algae double every day, and so the first day you notice there's a little blob of algae out there in the pond, and you think, yeah, there's a little algae, you hardly even notice. And then 5 days later, the algae is filling a quarter of the pond, and you think, I need to call somebody and get that taken care of, or it's going to completely remove the oxygen from the pond. It's going to destroy all the other life that I actually value in that pond. It's going to choke it off. And then the next day it's half full, and the next day it's full. Oh, that's inconvenient. And so that's where exponential goes. Is very, very rapid changes in very short periods of time. And I don't know what that means in terms of your expiration date. But it isn't long. And furthermore, it's never been long. You'll live to be 100, it's the blink of an eye. You're lying there on your deathbed, and you're thinking, man, I should have bought more crap. No, nobody thinks that. Everybody goes, that was fast. Wish I'd have had a few more moments to spend with my grandchildren. Wish I'd spent more time fishing. Wish I'd have spent more time doing the things I love. Wish I hadn't spent so much time at work. Wish I had 7 more pair of shoes. No, that one doesn't fit either. Right? So it's not about material possessions. It's about a life that doesn't last very long. So I encourage you to pursue your passion now. To live here now. To be with the ones you love. And create those moments of joy with those we love. That's not so horrible advice. No matter if you live to be 100. So, I suspect few of us will in this room. I suspect few of us will make it beyond the next decade or so. But we don't know. We don't know what the future holds, so let's try to make a better future for those we're with and generate those moments that aren't rooted in money. When greed is your only guide, sociopaths assume control. And that's exactly where we are. But we don't have to do that. So let's not.
Can I ask you a question? There's something that I'd like to know. I don't understand. How do the emissions from cell phones and things like that affect it? I don't understand. I mean, I can understand, car, gas.
Right. So one Google search kicks 7 grams of carbon into the atmosphere. Electricity is expensive.
So it's electricity.
Not in the pocket. Well, what does it take to generate electricity? A bunch of fossil fuels. Even if it's hydroelectric power, it still takes a bunch of fossil fuels. Maintaining an electrical grid, it's all about liquid fuels. Every time it snows, every time we have an ice storm, the lines come down. Every time the wind blows, somebody's got to go out there and straighten the lines back up. Got to maintain the system. Got to keep computers running. It takes a tremendous amount of fossil energy to maintain the electric grid. And then there's the cars and you've seen the bumper sticker on the 18-wheelers, right? Without trucks, America stops. That's about right. And that's all liquid fuels, getting 5 miles to the gallon, 10 miles to the gallon, whatever. And that's a finite material. And every time you turn on the internal combustion engine, you're geoengineering the planet. We all are. We're making our own contribution to warming the atmosphere today through the next thousands of years. So, and electricity is part of that. But, born into captivity. You know, try to escape the electrical monster. And how can you use electricity today? Right. Until you flush the toilet, turn on the lights, or answer the phone, or do almost anything that we take for granted. And then so what? So you managed to not use electricity for 1 hour. We have this Earth Hour thing, right? We used to have a whole Earth Day. Woo! 365 days out of the year. We celebrate one and dedicate it to the Earth. Some people. And then we have Earth Hour, where we turn off the lights for 1 hour around the globe. But then the next hour, the lights come on again. And other people aren't really paying attention. There are other monkeys in this jungle.
Buzzkill.
We had such fun at this event at Davis. Peter was on the panel and spoke right before me. Get all the students all fired up and all doing this. Woo, yay, life's good. And then I talked for 10 seconds and I'm like, I was having such fun until you showed up.
And that part of it, well, go ahead, sir, yeah.
Okay, so how about we cover most of the tundra with big sheets of plastic and about every 100 acres we have this one place for the methane to escape, and we keep that light there and keep it constantly burning. Don't we convert the methane into carbon, which is much less scary? How's about that?
Yes, so let's use petroleum products in plastic. Oh, wait.
Let's do it with hemp.
You know, the Arctic Methane Emergency Group recommends mining for methane in subsea permafrost and clathrates, hydrates. But there's no money in that. The energy return on investment for that is barely above 1, and maybe isn't even that. For tight oil, the energy return is between 3 and 5 to 1. So for the really hard to get oil, we still get about 3 barrels equivalent of oil for every barrel equivalent of energy we put into it. Nobody's going to go mine the methane. It's 1.00000001 return on investment. And it requires tremendous capital to even start. So until you change the way money works, you don't change anything at all.
There is a possibility, or maybe there is, that when things get to a certain point, people who have the capital or the equipment, etc., might decide to do something like he's saying, or do something, regardless of, when greed is no longer relevant, and they have the construction materials, people may do something.
Could be.
I mean, there's going to come a time when people are going to, some people are going to go, okay, this is it, I got to do something. I have the ability to try, and so I will try.
Do you think the people who are pulling the levers of industry don't know what I know?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I suspect they do.
I think they do. A couple of years ago, some guy contacted me in Texas, and he said, I'm going to go meet with somebody who's a multi-billionaire, and this is a guy who can make stuff happen. And I'm going to have lunch with him. I want you to stand by the phone so we can call you, and we'll convince him to save the world. And I said, okay, standing by. And he writes to me 2 days later, and he says, I talked to that guy, and that guy said Al Gore had a prominent political position. He had the ear of the American public. He had access to all the money he wanted, and he didn't move the needle one bit. He said, I'm not doing a thing. I'm going down with this ship. There's nothing to be done. This is a 1%. And you started by saying, yeah, I know all that stuff.
I would almost think that the 1%ers, or the people who have control over the levers, I would think that based on my feeling about the way they look at the world now, that they would be more inclined to just poison the shit out of all of us, and so they'd have the rest of what's left.
To really move into a different phase of this, and during the break, friends right here said, so what do we do? You know, what? Right? And so one of the answers that we like to give to that is, the first thing to do is realize you're not a human doing, that you're a human being. And that what this seems to be calling for from us is to represent humanity, to be the representation of humanity in the way that is for us, and to be with this situation. And that beingness will stir you toward what you need or are drawn to do. And that doingness will change all over the place, just like careers and lives and relationships and everything. That it's not necessarily any one set thing. But that when you allow your beingness, when you touch base with who you are in relationship to this moment in humanity, that energy can help you answer that question. That's not easy, of course. But I think it's the challenge that we've dared to be here for. I like to use the analogy of the Titanic. So there you are on your cruise ship. Cruise ship Earth. Best one ever made, can't sink. Woohoo, me and my gal, all right? Here we go. We're on the big boat, and we're having the time of our lives. All right, and here we go, trucking along, and pretty soon the captain comes on the loudspeaker. Excuse me, passengers. We seem to be headed for and maybe already hitting an iceberg. This is really bad. The ship will be going down. I don't know how long it's going to take. Dinner will not be served. There is a band playing in the lounge. Good night. Oh, and I'm sorry. Right, and there you are. And you're like, wait a minute. This is my cruise. This is the boat that couldn't sink. This is my life. What happens in that moment? So some people would say, we're going to kill that captain. And the next person says, well, where's the lifeboats? And the next person says, where's the lounge? I'm going to go to the party. And the next one says, where's my loved ones? I'm just going to lay with my loved ones. And the next one says, do you think we can turn that into a lifeboat? You see, everybody, and each of you in this room, and each of us on the planet, are likely to be confronted with this question. Who am I amidst the fact that this change is happening to me now, and to us now? And your answer gets to be uniquely yours. Yeah.
So if I were to share where I fit in this situation, I find myself feeling like all of you do, and here I am about to graduate with a degree in construction management from Chico State, and the construction industry may be one of the most evil industries out there. And so, my thoughts change a lot, but a lot of times I think that I'll pursue as much as I can working for a company that would, there's something called LEED buildings, leadership and energy efficient design, and I could, maybe specialize in building vegetative roofs so that, you can lower ozone depletion levels, and maybe my niche right there would, like you were saying earlier, where do we fit? And maybe that would be my small part of maybe the construction industry changing, in a direction that's positive. But, I'm with the pessimists in the room that I think there's almost no hope, and I don't even know if I should just drop out and not contribute to an industry that's putting huge amounts of carbon, using fossil fuels. And so I'm in this loop trying to make this decision. You know, here I chose a major because it works with how my brain works. I like science and I like logistics, and so for me, contributing to a company and helping them figure out how to create a structure would be great, it'd be fun for me, but like, contributing to that evil, so I just find myself in this really upsetting loop where I don't know to drop out and, disappoint my family, or, go for it and maybe help change, the industry's pathway in a positive direction, and then I find myself thinking it's worth it at all to even try that.
I'd like to comment on that. Okay, everyone in this room who doesn't believe in men who influence climate change, raise your hand. Okay, so you're preaching to the choir. You didn't have an answer for my recommendation, but I would recommend you go into that and preach to people that aren't part of the choir. Okay.
Yes, sir. I've been wrestling whether I should ask this question in this group or not, but I'm going to. And you're the pro, you're the scientist, you have the knowledge. According to you, we're past the tipping point. Our future is inevitable. So if it's inevitable, and little measures like that really aren't going to change it, why aren't we just partying like it's 1999? I mean, I'm serious in a sense that
we get that question.
you're talking about non-believers. If you're a true believer in what you say, there's nothing we can do to change. Then just build your buildings. My analogy is 80-year-old man, smoked his whole life, goes to the doctor. Doctor says, you're going to die in 6 months. Well, what if I stop smoking? You're going to die anyway. Would you stop smoking if you get joy out of smoking? I'd continue smoking, I know that. So why should we even try? If you're saying, I've been waiting all night for you to say, if we don't change something, this is our future.
Right.
But there is no if there.
This is what differentiates me from the other 99.9% of climate scientists, is they think we can change squirrely light bulbs and it'll be fun.
Yes. So let's not change light bulbs.
If I gave you 3 things to do when you walked out of here tonight, I would be on the mainstream media every night. I'd be everybody's favorite television climate scientist. I'd be a rock star. I wouldn't be living out of the back of the car with this guy. So a couple of things. So, given a terminal diagnosis, Americans might act like hedonists. Really? When does that start? Americans have been acting like hedonists my entire life. We have the world's reserve currency. I know almost no college students who come to college and have not made the obligatory trip to Western Europe to see another culture, which is exactly like the culture we're living in here. We do what we want. We've always done what we want. Every one of our children is equivalent to 37 children in Kenya. You think we're going to do something worse? Inconceivable. Secondly, I think that following the principles of Buddhism, and I'm not a Buddhist and I barely know what that even means, that we should do what we think is the right thing regardless of the outcome. Hope and fear are the twin sides of the I can't predict the future coin. We do something because we hope it will make for a better future for me and those around me. We do something because we fear that if we don't do it, something bad will happen to me or those around me. How about if we do what we think is the right thing and not become attached to the outcome? How about we do what we think is the right thing, regardless of how that might turn out? Our lives are short. We've known that for our entire lives. I mean, at least since you were 10. everybody who's been paying attention knows that birth is lethal. And so let's, you know, I made a major change in my life. I committed to it more than 7 years ago. That was to move to this homestead. And I quit doing what I loved and that I was really, really good at. And it was the biggest mistake of my life. Because I was doing what I loved and I moved to a homestead. And now I'm no longer able to make that connection with college students like I once was able. I was doing what I loved and I'm not doing it anymore. Find what you love. Do what you love. Try to do what's right for those around you, including the living planet, including non-human species. I don't think we can do better than that. For some people, that's going to mean a hedonistic route. But I'd be hard-pressed to find a majority of Americans who would change their lives in light of a terminal diagnosis in a way that would be worse for the living planet than the way we're living now.
Good answer.
This ain't my first rodeo.
If I may speak for a second. I feel like I'm going to really regret coming to this and not saying how I feel about it before I just leave. First, I want to say that I'm in the exact same boat as you. My major is mechanical engineering, and I'm going to graduate if I keep doing what I'm doing in the spring. I feel like collectively in this room we make up maybe an individual consciousness that is very small, and because our ideas are big but we're very small, it's difficult right now, it looks bleak. But I think that when we reach the tipping point, so to speak, collapse, we'll realize that we're stronger together. And I really am one of the crazy people to think if all of us band together, we're going to come up with solutions that are bigger than anything we've ever done before. And I think that if we choose to fight the good fight, we're not going to be alone for very long. But I don't know, it's just a belief.
Thank you for saying that. And I think that's completely consistent with if you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, then do. You know, Derek Jensen, who is the philosopher poet of the environmental movement in this country, has a degree in civil engineering. It's not the worst route to go. He understands what it takes to dismantle industrial civilization, to use the tools that he has in his arsenal to do what he believes are the right actions. And we can all take those right actions from our own perspective, regardless of where we're at.
Are we talking monkey wrench game? I mean, yes. Or did I interpret you the right way? What you said? Okay.
Yes.
I interrupted, but I.
No, that's fine. And there's a wonderful online free book at underminers.org called Underminers. It's by Keith Varnish. It's about how to undermine industrial civilization. So we have these tools that not very many people are pursuing, and I don't care whether you pursue them or not. Do what you think is right, do what you love. We're born into captivity, there's no escape. It doesn't matter whether you drop out of college, or you drop out of college, or you drop out of college. In the grand scheme of things, that matters only to you. So do what you love, recognize that you're born into this set of living arrangements, and there's no escape. Unless you're willing to go live in a cave and suck guts out of bugs, there's no way to live beyond this culture. And so let's live within this culture and try to change it and make it a better culture and a better world. But that entails thinking very locally, because you're not going to convince Barack Obama to turn off the taps as if he has that kind of power in him.
I think that when the shit hits the fan, as that's what we're talking about, that all people will have gifts to offer. You know, we're not all going to suddenly die. Sure, there's probably going to be, you know, mass die-off, and there's going to be a lot of crisis and a lot of pain, and there's going to be a lot more panic than there is now. I happen to think there's so much anxiety in the world now at this moment that it's almost unbearable for most of us who conceive it. And I think obviously it's going to get more so, and I think the reason that people can't hear what the truth is because they really are hearing it and they don't know how to tolerate it. And so learning to calm yourself down, you know, whether it's through a spiritual practice or meditation or, you know, whatever thing works for you as an individual, I think is going to be, you know, from my perspective, one of the most important things that we can do as a human being is to really learn how to calm yourself down without the use of, you know, massive amounts of substances or, you know, video games. I mean, those are all drugs, and we all know those things are drugs. And I think that's why we're so drug involved in our society right now. And frankly, throughout the world, the drug abuse rates in the rest of the world are pretty unbelievable at this point. It's because we all know this. We know this, but we can't tolerate it. And so we do what we can to make it tolerable, whether it's healthy or not.
Yes, a relatively calm and thoughtful approach is welcome no matter what's going on. I tell people all the time, the shit is not hitting the fan. The fan is covered with shit, and the shit is hitting the shit. So there's already a lot of anxiety out there.
Right.
And people have reached their breaking point, in some cases many years ago.
Right.
So you panic, everybody else come with me.
Right.
Yeah, I'm really touched by, well, your comment, your question, and then the young people who just spoke. Because I hear this all the time from my students too. Well, we're fucked, so what do? Do we just party on and not care, or do we keep trying, or what do we do? And a long time ago, when I was in college, I read a book by Albert Camus called The Plague. Has anyone read that book? And the way that I interpreted that book was you have a doctor during the bubonic plague, right? And he knows that the plague is so deadly and it's spreading so fast that it's really a moot point that he can't stop the plague, right? And he could have left and gone away and saved himself, you know, which would be the hedonistic, I'm just going to do what I want. But he made a conscious decision to stay and fight the plague. And the plague is about, you know, communism or whatever. But I look at it in a different way. And I think that act of conscience that said, I have this one human life, and I have a gift or I have a skill that I've been given that I'm passionate about, and I'm going to use that to the bitter end because I want my life to have meaning. I need for my life to have meaning. Whether you use that to undermine, I use my teaching to undermine. I'm in the system and I use the system to undermine the system, basically. And that's always been a really good strategy, people getting their degrees or their careers or their skills and getting inside the system to change the system or undermine the system or whatever. So that's an honorable thing, if you choose to do that. But I think really finding meaning in your life and knowing that when you are on your deathbed and you look back and you say, I did everything I could, that's, I think, for me, I would get a lot more out of that than if I said to myself, well, man, I partied hardy and screwed over a bunch of people and I don't care.
I want to see some people enjoy partying when they don't have any water and they don't have any food. And they can't breathe. It's going to be a really good time to go. Go down and have a big thing. We were talking during the break about one of the ways to understand climate change is your body temperature is 98.6. So let's increase it to 99. Let's increase it 1 degree. Or 2 degrees or 3 degrees. So Scientists told me we were at 100, 102.
101.
So let's say we're 101, 102. I was thinking, well, maybe we're at 99. Maybe our body temperature is 99, so we already got changes going on. So if you look at, if you look at Earth is having a temperature of 102 or 101, whatever it is, you're going to see changes happen. But science is incomplete. And how would you like to commit suicide for a disease you had and they found the discovery for it 2 days later? So maybe the methane comes loose, something else happens, maybe we have, so if we move on solving those issues, maybe we get somewhere. And some of those issues you were asking Chico, we're going to have fires. We're going to have drought. We're going to be drilling deeper water. We're going to have a lot of those impacts. And we need local food. We need all those things. So the people who believe in those things can start working together to accomplish it. You don't have to wait for everyone to come along. And certainly don't wait for the government. And, move forward. So.
And again, I think that's why detachment from the outcome is so important. You take what you think are the right steps, regardless. And maybe something you said reminded me to paraphrase Derek Jensen again. We're clever enough and complicated enough organisms to realize two things and hold two thoughts in our head at the same time. We're really, really fucked. And life is really, really wonderful. Yes. Yes, life is amazing. It's incredible to be here. And unlike everybody else who left before the movie was over, we get to be here at the end. It's amazing. It's wonderful. To be here at this time in human history is astonishing. Is it thoughtful? Yeah, of course. But then you could argue it always has been.
So Ishi was asked, that's the local native, I guess considered the last wild Indian in North America to maybe 1911. So after being in San Francisco for 2 or 3 years, they really pressed him, what is your opinion of Western civilization? What do you think of this new society? And that was his exact answer, clever but not wise. And so that was his perspective, right? But you really get back to the four elements: earth, wind, water, and fire. It's been through civilizations all the way through. And if you want to understand it from a practical standpoint, those four elements are something you have to spend time on. And we don't have any water policies. We have new orchards going in where there's no orchards. But we're in the middle of a drought. And so there's no connection to that. But I think people agree, need to band together and start working together. I mean, if you believe in the Bible story, what Jesus did with 12 disciples. All I'm trying to do is run a farm, an organic farm. We got people from all over the country, some of them here to help make that happen. So there's all kinds of models that can be created that people can get involved in. So don't wait for the government. I served in government for 10 years. I was sat on this platform with presidents. And to me, it's like you got a 747, you're on autopilot, and you think there's somebody up there in the seat driving it. They're not. That's a false sense of security. If you think the government's going to do something, or the only person who's going to do something is you. And I think, Chico, it's a progressive community, but we don't do enough.
I think to start to bring this to a close, you talk about community, you talk about coming together, you talk about humanity, remembering that we are all connected. And not only are we all connected to each other, but we're connected to our planet. And we're also connected to our choices and our future. And to whatever degree, we're connected to this amazing cosmic story that we're part of. And one avenue to find peace is to explore for yourself what do you believe about the cosmic story, about whatever you think your creator is, and how does your creator story tie into who will you be amidst this situation. And so that's really served for me to dare to look at that bigger picture and to dare to know myself beyond my humanity. We've been so stuck in our humanity. And that's what's created this separation, created this situation that we're in, is we forgot that we're part of a planet. And we forgot that all these other species were a delicate web that made all this possible. And we were an experiment, and this is what's happening. You know, that's how I see it. And I get some peace from that, for what that's worth, but I invite you to dare to explore your personal perspective of source, energy, and infinite life. And who do you become amidst the pondering of that for yourself, and knowing yourself beyond your humanity so that we could care for the other species in our delicate web. And that perhaps in the end, we're being called upon to say, who are we as humanity? Each of us representatives of humanity in this last burst of creativity, imagination, love. Who are we? Who can we be? Who do you choose to be? And so we're going to end tonight by holding hands and by going around the circle, and you get one word. 2 if you want to sneak a second one in, so that everybody's voice will be in this circle that we have. So let's reach out and do the community thing that we know is important. And dare to do that more in your life. Dare to hug more. Dare to reach out and grab somebody and say hello. You know, we need to, as these people on the cutting edge, we need to dare to be those people that can hold a hand, that can hug and can be there for somebody and to help each other along while we're playing this game. So, I'll start and we'll go this way around and wow.
Thank you. Forever.
Spirit. Laugh.
Perfection.
No.
Act positively.
Truth.
Kindness.
Bliss. Good grief.
Persist.
Cosmic chuckle. Amen.
Movement.
Community.
Vibrational frequencies.
Audacious.
Yes. Trust vibration.
Wow.
Possibility. Cornucopia.
Compassion.
Evolve.
Endure.
I am.
Ice cream.
Gratitude.
We're going to go around again to feel that next level of depth. And another minute. So go around again. Awe.
Heart. Connection.
Seek. Laugh hysterically.
Grace.
Family.
Now, build.
Connecting.
Patience.
Share.
Understand.
She stole my word, Bill. Say it again, family.
Contentment.
Inspiration.
Cherish.
Pulsation.
Absolutely bodacious.
Do it. Yes.
Freedom.
Reality. Buddha.
Humor.
Seeds. Space.
Live life. Still.
Breathe.
Liberation.
Look around. Catch a bunch of eyeballs. See the beauty. Walk out of here. There's a different world out there. You get to decide what that different world is for you. I suspect if you're anything like me, you'll You'll see the leaves slightly differently. You'll hear the wind a little differently. You'll see a smile and give a smile. You'll dare to hug or heal. Make amends where you might want to make amends. Laugh because you can, and because you can see beyond all of this. There's more than this. We can live audacious. What a trip to watch you. 5 minutes ago you didn't know what was going on, and here you are finding that peace already in just a matter of minutes to say, yeah, this is amazing. This is totally bodacious, right? And at the same time, it's big trouble too. But we can hold both of those. We can look the dragon in the eye, and we can say, okay, that's where we're at. We can live with peace, we can live with joy, we can do what it is we're moved to do, because we touch base with the beingness, who we are, and let that lead us. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. And again, thank you. And thank you, God.
Thank you.
Oh.